What is up, guys? Eric here from Real Film Reviews, bringing you another movie review, this time for the new Tom Hardy film, Venom. Venom is directed by Ruben Fleischer, stars Tom Hardy, Michelle Williams, and Riz Ahmed. It tells the story of Eddie Brock, who is an investigative journalist who basically, through his choices in terms of how he decides to research things, causes a lot of problems in his life, which eventually sort of take him on a dark turn. And when Riz Ahmed, who is the CEO of this massive company, comes upon alien life and Tom Hardy decides that he needs to research it, he accidentally gets infected with this symbiote known as Venom. The cast all does a great job in this movie. I have to say that they all looked like they were having fun while making it, which I think is very important for a superhero film, because this movie's tone was a lot more different than I expected, which I'll talk about more later, but I think the fact that all of the cast seemed to be having a good time while making it helped make it easier for the audience to have a good time. Tom Hardy was really good in this movie, as he is in basically everything. Michelle Williams classes the joint up a bit because she's an insanely talented actress who's been in much more serious and much more critically acclaimed films than Venom, and she just really brings up the acting to another level in this film. And then Riz Ahmed, I think, does his best impression of if Elon Musk was actually an evil genius who wanted to end the world. And that's not an insult. I think he did it extremely well, and I very much enjoyed him in this film. He was a very hateable villain, which is good because Marvel has really struggled with their villains, I think, in their universe. And granted, Venom doesn't take place in the normal universe because it's made by Sony and all these weird rights laws, but I think that they made a actually hateable villain who, while generic in some aspects, was at least somewhat interesting before he sort of took that turn to be a true supervillain. Because really the only good villains Marvel's ever had have been Vulture, Thanos, and Loki. That's about it. Everyone else they've ever had in a movie has either been just okay or bad. And then, as I previously said, this movie's tone is much more different than I expected it to be. I think from the trailers and its choice of release date being in October, a lot of people thought that they were walking into a pretty dark, not a horror film, but a movie that was going to be very gritty and in your face and try to almost be somewhat scary. But instead, this movie's almost like a dark action comedy, because obviously there's action because it's a superhero movie and, you know, there's big budget fight scenes and things like that. But this movie's very funny, but it's funny in a dark way. You know, Venom and Tom Hardy's banter between one another, because Venom's basically in his head, but he audibly talks back to him, makes for some of the biggest laughs in the movie because their banter is very funny, but it normally comes from very dark humor about Venom wanting to eat people or kill things or destroy stuff, and Tom Hardy trying to like back him down. And I think that the two voices there make for the funniest aspect of this film. But that's not it. This movie also has a lot of comedy, just kind of small, almost I would say slapstick-esque comedy in some scenes that just sort of throws itself in there, like when Tom Hardy first gets infected and things like that. I think that this film is rather well directed. The action is normally shot in pretty wide angles. Sure, there are some scenes where some stuff is kind of hidden, but for the most part, I thought it worked very well. My one issue with the action, though, is a pretty big one, and it's that this film is full of so much CGI. And I understand that for Venom, they have to make him CGI because they want him to actually look like Venom from the comics, who is this very big and frightening figure to basically be standing across from. But I think the fact that there's just an insane amount of CGI in every action sequence really kind of brings those action sequences down, because I would like to say that I was able to sit there and watch them and enjoy them, but there are times, especially in the big climactic action sequence at the end, where it just feels like I'm watching something that's animated rather than watching a live action sequence. And I understand making something practical in these scenes would be extremely difficult, but I hope that when this film gets a sequel, because with the amount of money it's made, it's for sure getting one, that they will choose to invest some in at least some practical effects for the movie. Plot-wise, I really enjoyed the first act of this film. It got me interested, it built characters that I was intrigued to see where they went, and for the most part, I was very invested in it. And then the symbiotes show up, and really, I hate to say that they drag the movie down, because obviously they're the thing that bring all of the action and excitement to the film, but once they show up, the main plot of the film kind of just disappears, and the movie is now just look, there's symbiotes here. And I was kind of disappointed by that because I thought the beginning of this film had such an interesting plot with Riz Ahmed's character sort of viewing the Earth in this certain way that I don't want to spoil, and then Tom Hardy's character choosing to try to tell the world about that. But it was very disappointing to me that they just sort of abandon that once the symbiotes show up, because then it turns into just this big alien fest of we have to fight things and get to this place and do all these things, which obviously led to cool action sequences and a lot of fun moments, but I feel like it sort of left the plot behind. And then along with that, I would also say, with the exception of Eddie Brock, once the symbiotes show up, we also see a nosedive in character development. We don't really get to learn much more about Michelle Williams' character or Riz Ahmed's character, who both play a very pivotal role in this film, and I think that if they would have chosen to at least keep building the characters as the film went on, it would have made it so even if the plot took a bit of a hit, it wouldn't have felt like the characters also did. But instead, both of them, with the exception of Eddie Brock, really just sort of disappeared once the symbiotes showed up, which was disappointing because from the first act, I did enjoy these characters and I wanted to learn more about them and I wanted to see where they would grow and how this movie would come to its conclusion. But instead, by the end of it, I still only really knew what I knew from the first 30 minutes. I'm gonna give Venom a C+. I think that this film's getting a bad rap because people went into it expecting the wrong thing. I think people walked into it wanting this big, epic, action-filled, almost kind of scary superhero film. But what you get, as I said, is kind of this sort of interesting, dark action comedy where there's a lot of jokes, there's CGI fight scenes that are really fun to watch, and then you get a lot of fun performances. This movie isn't some game-changing superhero movie. This isn't going to change the way we view superhero films going forward. But what I think it was a movie that you can watch, and if all you go into it looking for is an entertaining 2 hours, you get that out of this film. I was thoroughly entertained for 2 hours. The movie is far from perfect, but it's also not some atrocity against superhero films. Well guys, as always, I'm Eric. If you enjoyed this video, please do like, subscribe, comment down below what you thought of Venom, share everything we do here on Real Film Reviews, and I hope to see you guys later.